to the World War II newspaper channel where we read the Chicago Tribune one day at a time, going through World War II as it happened through the eyes of those who lived it. If you enjoy content like this, please subscribe to this channel and click on the bell icon to get notifications when a new upload is going to premiere. And also, if you want to hear the actual newsmakers, go check out my other channel, the companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. There we have vintage broadcasts, including newscasts, speeches, old movies, and music. And subscribe to that channel and click on the bell icon. Now for the newspaper. As a real quick note, let me just tell you that after we are done with the newspaper, which will include movie listings today, we are also going to have a sort of a Dear Abby type of column at the end of the newspaper that you might find interesting. I don't normally share that or read that to you, but there was a couple interesting things in there, so I thought I would share it. So we will have that at the very end of the newspaper. So check that out. All right, well, let's start this. News as read from the Chicago Tribune for Saturday, January 11th, 1941. Henry Chop reporting. The weather today. The sun rose at 7:17 a.m. It set at 4:39 p.m. For Chicago and vicinity, mostly cloudy with not much change in temperature. Saturday, Sunday, partly cloudy, slowly rising temperature, gentle to moderate north or northeast winds on Saturday. The low temperature 22 degrees, the high temperature 39. Today's headline: Senators to fight FDR bill. Demand for unlimited power over arms stuns Congress. Washington, D.C., January 10th. Congress was stunned today by the unexampled enormity of powers requested by President Roosevelt in his bill to permit the lending or giving of war munitions to the nations fighting the Axis powers and the opening of the American ports to the warships of Great Britain. A request for blank check authority had been expected, but the scope of the bill introduced in the Senate and House today exceeded all advance intimations. The immediate reaction indicated considerably more opposition to the measure than the administration had expected. Well-informed members said the bill probably would go through the House substantially unchanged, but a number of senators declared a vigorous fight on the measure would be conducted in the Senate. They predicted the bill would have to be drastically revised to be reported by the Foreign Relations Committee. Non-interventionists said the bill combined a declaration of war against Germany, Italy, and Japan with the creation of a totalitarian dictatorship in the United States. Administration supporters conceded that never in the history of the Republic, not including the World War days under Woodrow Wilson or the so-called 100 days of the first rubber-stamp Congress under Mr. Roosevelt, had an American president sought such an imperial grant of power. Supporters of the legislation took the position, however, that if the president's policy of giving full support to the nations at war with the totalitarian powers is to be carried out, he must be granted unlimited power to act. Washington, D.C., January 10th. The pertinent provisions of the bill introduced in Congress today to authorize the transfer of United States war materials to other nations would empower President Roosevelt, number one, to manufacture an arsenal factories and shipyards or otherwise procure any defense article for the government of any country whose defense the president deems vital to the defense of the United States. The term defense article is defined as any weapon, munition, aircraft, vessel, or boat, tools, machinery, and materials used in the manufacture, servicing, or operations of defense articles and other commodities or articles for defense. The bill expressly states that the term defense article includes those to which the United States has or hereafter acquires title, possession, or control. Number 2. To sell, transfer, exchange, lease, lend, or otherwise dispose of to any such government any defense article, including equipment now in use, on order or hereafter ordered by the Army and Navy. 3. To test, inspect, prove, repair, outfit, recondition, or otherwise to place in good working order any defense article for any such government, including the warships of Great Britain or other governments. Number 4, to communicate to any such government any defense information pertaining to any defense article furnished to such government. Number 5, to release for export any defense article to any such government. This authority would permit the release of any secret device possessed by the Army and Navy, such as a bomb sight. The famous Sperry bomb sight already has been released, but the administration contends that the Norden sight is a better one and has not been released. London, January 10th. Harry Hopkins, President Roosevelt's personal envoy, told British newspapermen today, according to the Daily Telegraph, that the president would not hesitate to adopt powers to deprive America of luxury commodities if their production interferes with the output of war materials. The newspaper said Hopkins indicated the production of such commodities need not necessarily interfere with the war effort, but assured British questioners at a press conference which followed a 3-hour luncheon discussion of matters of mutual urgency with Prime Minister Winston Churchill that we would not hesitate to take the powers to avoid any such interference. He told the British reporters, the newspaper said, that the United States realized it would not be able to carry on business as usual. Earlier, he replied no comment to most questions asked by American correspondents and refused to reveal the nature of the information which President Roosevelt is seeking regarding the British war effort, their needs and intentions, or the promises, if any, which he was to make on behalf of the president. He predicted, however, that production of war materials in the United States would reach its peak in about another year, and declared, "I have no misgivings about the outcome of this war. There is going to be a united and altogether successful effort in the production of defense materials to be used by ourselves, Great Britain, Greece, and China." Hopkins also said he would be in London for 2 weeks at least, and at the most 4 weeks, or until I have finished the job I came to do. He said he intended to make a trip around England. The American emissary also had a long talk with Lord Halifax, new British ambassador to America, and Anthony Eden, foreign secretary. Hopkins arrived in London last night just after a heavy air raid had begun, but brushed aside that experience with the assertion that nothing is less important than my impressions of air raids. New York, January 10th. Asked to comment on the administration bill authorizing President Roosevelt to lend or lease war equipment to democracies, former President Herbert Hoover issued the following statement today. The first thing Congress has to consider is the suggestion of enormous surrender of its responsibilities. No such powers were granted in the last war. So far as I know, no such surrender has been made by the British Parliament either in the last war or this war. We all wish our industry tuned up to maximum output for our defense and to aid other countries to defend their independence. But the practical surrender of power to take these steps that are possible under this legislation is something else. It enters the field of preservation of democracy in this country. New York, January 10th. District Attorney Thomas E. Dewey, unsuccessful candidate for the Republican nomination for the presidency last year, today characterized President Roosevelt's so-called defense bill as a measure which would bring an end to free government in the United States and would abolish the Congress for all practical purposes. I strongly favor every possible aid to Great Britain short of war, said Dewey's statement. I am sure it is the United States' united desire of our people to halt dictator aggressors. There has been no refusal by Congress to support the victims of aggression. I am sure there will be none. The president has no right to assume that Congress lacks patriotism or in these times will fail to do its duty swiftly and effectively. This bill is an attempt to abolish free government in the United States. In short, this bill empowers the president to commit acts of war without the approval of Congress in any conflict, present or future, anywhere in the world. This is the time for national unity. The president's proposal is a grave blow not only to national unity, but to all free government everywhere. All aid to the embattled free countries can be provided by an America which is still free and working under the democratic process. I am sure Congress will authorize all possible aid without surrendering its right to represent the people. Washington, D.C., January 10th. Many 100% New Deal supporters avoided comment today on President Roosevelt's request for vast new powers, but others immediately attacked his proposal as enabling him to declare war and establish a dictatorship at home. Even outright advocates of American entry into the war were amazed by his demands. Most legislators seem to agree that the measure faces a long, hard fight in the Senate. Among the comments on Capitol Hill were the following. Senator Hiram Johnson, Republican, California. I regard the bill as presented this morning as monstrous. I am neither an appeaser nor a Hitlerite. I want to see Hitler whipped and Britain triumphant, but I decline to change the form of my government on the spacious plea of assisting one belligerent. The bill presents squarely to the Congress of the United States whether it shall create a dictatorship. Senator Bennett C. Clark, Democrat, Missouri. It is simply a bill to authorize the president to declare war so far as international affairs are concerned and to establish a totalitarian government so far as domestic affairs are concerned. New York, January 10th. Vern Marshall, chairman of the No Foreign War Committee, said tonight in commenting on the administration bill to lend or lease war equipment to countries at war that Mr. Roosevelt has asked Congress to surrender to him in its exclusive war-making power and authority. He is asking for exactly that kind of dictatorial power which has so incensed him when exercised by governments elsewhere in this chaotic world, Marshall said. If Mr. Roosevelt gets his wish, National Socialism will replace democracy here and the United States will go to war. Here, finally, is disclosure of a carefully laid plan to concentrate in one man's hands powers which our Constitution expressly forbids. He said the No Foreign War Committee believed it inconceivable that Congress would submit to such an outrageous attempt to set up a dictatorship. Washington, D.C., January 10th. The all-out aid to Britain bill took the number H.R. 1776 today when it reached the House Bill Clerk's office. The fact that the number coincides with the year of the United States' independence was said by officials to be purely coincidence. The last bill bore the number 1775, the clerk said, and this bill was the first to reach this office today. It was designated 1776 as a matter of routine. And now for world news. Athens, Greece, January 10th. While Greeks at home rejoiced in the streets over fresh victories in Albania, the forces at the front today reported to have pushed past captured Klissura toward Valona, last important port in southern Albania, still held by the Italians. Greek troops occupying Klissura today found it had been burned and pillaged, a general headquarters communique said. Most of the townspeople had deserted the town, but 600 Italian soldiers were taken prisoner and 4 guns, some tanks, and mortars and automatic guns were captured, the communique said. Greek aviation was reported to have bombed and machine-gunned Italian positions without losing a plane. With the spearhead of the Greek drive in the Klissura sector, only about 30 miles from Valona, Italian troops beyond Klissura were said to be in disorderly retreat. As a result of Klissura's fall, military observers predicted the Italians probably would be forced to abandon Tepelini 15 miles west of Klissura on the way to Valona. It was a few miles beyond Klissura in the direction of Berat that the Italians were said to be withdrawing. Klissura stands at the crossroad, one leading to Berat and Durazzo, the other to Valona. 2 Greek drives have been headed at Valona, one on the central front toward Klissura and Tepelini, and the other from Chimera to Porta Eda up the Adriatic coast. A Greek spokesman revealed a raid by 200 Italians in mortar launches January 6 on the Aegean island of Canaros. There are only 2 people living on the island, he said. The Italian raiders searched their huts and departed the next day. As General John Metexis told his cabinet about the capture of Klissura, crowds gathered joyfully in the streets to celebrate. King George and others high in the government appeared at the windows and bells pealed throughout the country. Rome, January 10th. The Italian High Command today announced that fascist warships had shelled enemy coastal positions in the Greek campaign. It also reported local action and artillery activity on the Albanian front, with hits reported on anti-aircraft emplacements at an enemy naval base. Rome, January 10th. An official Italian announcement today placed fascist losses in the war with Greece during December at 8,951 men, including 1,301 killed, 3,052 missing, and 4,598 wounded. An official Italian resume on December 23rd said that in the first 6 months of the European war, Italy's casualties numbered 18,824 men, including 4,531 killed, 10,055 wounded, and 4,238 missing. These figures, covering the period from Italy's entry into the war against the Allies on June 10th until December 12th, did not break down the losses by fronts and did not include the latest figures from Albania, where losses were said to have been heavy. Red Cross figures at Athens show that the Greeks have taken more than 14,000 prisoners since the beginning of the Greek-Italian conflict. In addition to these, the Italians were said by the Greeks to have shipped home 35,000 sick and wounded from the port of Valona alone. Cairo, Egypt, January 10th. Britain's batteries in Libya shelled Italian-held Tobruk today in the initial blow of an attack patterned after that which reduced Bardia 50 miles to the east 5 days ago. Nearly cut off by an encircling movement of British mechanized units 50 miles to the west, Tobruk was rapidly being surrounded by British land forces, while its outer defenses were battered by big siege guns rolled into place from Bardia. The seacoast town, if the Bardia pattern is followed, faces not only a heavy attack from land, but severe bombing from the air and shelling from the sea. The aerial bombardment already has started. British flyers reported an attack on the town today. The British said Benina airdrome in Libya again was raided, with at least 12 Italian planes destroyed and hangars and other buildings blown to pieces by direct hits. While Tobruk was being put under siege, the British sought to drive a corridor across the hump of Libya to cut off the whole province of Cyrenaica. This would put the British advance guard on the Mediterranean at the base of the Gulf of Sidra, 300 miles from the Libyan-Egyptian frontier, and isolate both Tobruk and Benghazi. Some 2,500 miles to the southeast of the Libyan front, the British General Headquarters reported that troops of the reinforced South African Army had captured Buna in the Moyale sector of Kenya, which the Italians have held for months. It was reported that revolting tribesmen in Italian-conquered Ethiopia were attacking airdromes and cutting the Italian lines of supply to the Kenya sector. The British indicated their forces had carried the fight also to Italian East Africa and the Kenyan-Italian Somaliland border zone, where they reported fascist troops had abandoned El Wak. Rome, January 10th. The Italian High Command today reported that fascist planes hit about 100 mechanized vehicles in the Libyan desert, while other British mechanized equipment was destroyed by artillery fire at Tobruk, the principal remaining Italian stronghold in eastern Italy. The 100 British motor units said to have been hit by Italian planes were headed toward Akroma, about 100 miles south of and slightly west of Tobruk. Other Italian planes were credited with bombing Salem, Egypt, and machine gunning tents and armored cars in East African area near Kassala and Skiu Sieb. Struga, Yugoslavia at the Albanian frontier, January 10th. 80 Albanians captured by the Italians after revolting at Peshkapati on the shore of Lake Otrida were reported to have been executed by a firing squad. Fighting between the Albanians and the Italian troops started when the Albanians refused to continue forced labor on roads and fortifications, border reports said. Cairo, Egypt, January 10th. British pilots dropped several tons of bombs on the harbor of Messina, Sicily, last night, and a whole series of explosives fell across the Italian cruisers, the British Middle East Command announced tonight. The vessels attacked were said to have laid down such a thick smoke screen that whatever damage was done could not be observed. Several tons of bombs were dropped on naval vessels in the harbor and on wharves, docks, and oil storage plants, the statement said. One stick of bombs straddled the Army marshalling yards and oil tanks to the south of the harbor. Fires were started at wharves and near the dry dock. Other bombs fell very close to the oil storage plant, causing explosions with green flashes. All our aircraft returned undamaged to their base. British bombs fell on or very near the stern of an Italian battleship of the Littorio class, causing a dull red glow, the British Air Force reported of a Wednesday night raid on Naples. The Littorio class is Italy's new 35,000-ton division. The Littorio, Vittorio Veneto, Imperio, and Roma. Only the Littorio and the Vittorio Veneto have been put into service. The others are building. One of the class was claimed by the British to have been hit and left badly down by the bows in the aerial torpedo attack in the Taranto base on the night of November 11th, 12th. The communique also reported direct hits on the Naples railway station and added that fires were started among large motor vessels in the harbor and along the waterfront. Several bombs hit buildings on the quay, rail lines were blasted, and a series of thundering explosions erupted, the statement went on. Palermo, Sicily, the object of a Wednesday night raid, received a return call, the communique said, adding that bombs straddled the wharf there, causing explosions. Rome, January 10th. Destructive blows against enemy naval power and shipping, including a bomb hit on a British battleship, sinking of 2 submarines, and attacks on 4 merchant vessels were announced today by the Italian High Command. The bombing of a British battleship, unofficially denied in London, occurred in a raid on an eastern Mediterranean naval formation, the Italian High Command said. It said 1 British plane was shot down, but acknowledged 2 Italian aircraft failed to return. One of the 2 submarines sunk by Italian torpedo boats, the communique said, was the 1,400-ton French Narval. Loss of the Narval, first French naval unit employed on Britain's side, was reported by Free French headquarters in London Thursday. Italian submarines operating in the Atlantic were said to have sunk the 2,883-ton Greek freighter Anastasia and the armed British ship Shakespeare. Other submarines were credited with torpedo hits on 2 vessels in the Mediterranean convoy. London, January 11th. In the mightiest daylight offensive ever loosed by the Royal Air Force, 50 British bombers and 500 fighter planes delivered a ground-shaking assault yesterday over 1,000 square miles in northwestern France. London, however, passed the night without an alarm. The Air Ministry itself announced in general terms merely that more than 100 fighters were involved, but unofficial observers said the fighters outnumbered the bombers by 10-1. They were declared to have struck at the Channel Strait areas of Calais and Boulogne and elsewhere upon the bases of the Nazi invasion effort, sweeping the German positions with bombs and machine gun fire, the latter from 8-gun fighter craft, which formed the biggest escort ever to take off from England. 3 of the few German planes which rose to challenge the raiders were shot down, the Air Ministry said, but a single British plane was lost, that on the return trip. In Berlin, the official German news agency DNB reported that 8 British planes were destroyed in the attack. Informed sources asserted no bombs fell on military objectives. For an hour just at midday, British explosives fell. Hits were claimed upon a series of airdromes assaulted by planes diving down to within 200 feet of the target and upon German patrol ships and military buildings. The southeast English coast, 20 to 30 miles from the coastal targets, shuddered under the shock. It was a raid likened by British aviation circles to the Great German mass attacks of last September on Britain, but more successful than these. British flyers returned last night and blasted the Brest naval base in German-occupied France. This daytime attack followed Thursday night forays even bigger in scope, extending from the coast of Norway to interior Germany and southern France, many of them carried out through very unfavorable weather. The announced results as follows. In Germany, synthetic oil plant at Gelsenkirchen left burning, factories attacked in the Ruhr. In Holland's docks at Flushing attacked along with an oil storage plant at Rotterdam. In France, Brest hit again, Dunkirk and Calais as well. Britain suffered a heavy new blow too when hundreds of high explosives and incendiary bombs were rained on a south coast town last night and early today in a furious German attack. The British Press Association said it is feared there were many casualties. A first attempt to start a fire blitz on the town was turned back early last night by RAF fighter planes. Then a second and larger wave of raiders smothered the town with incendiaries and explosives. Berlin, January 10th. British planes raiding various places in Germany last night killed 20 persons and left many injuries, the German High Command announced today. New York, January 10th. A Red Cross spokesman said today that the 5,010-ton American freighter Cold Harbor was on its way to Baltimore to load a $1 million cargo of food and medicines for Spain and France. British authorities have agreed to permit the vessel to take the cargo through the blockade. Berlin, January 10th. The German Navy has lost war vessels aggregating 70,000 tons since the war began, according to figures released today. The British, on the other hand, admit the loss of warships totaling more than 450,000 tons, the Germans asserted. These inroads on the British fleet, combined with the recent completion of two 35,000-ton battleships and other war vessels by Germany, have changed the ratio between the two navies in favor of Germany, the Nazis declared. The pocket battleship Admiral Graf Spee, which was scuttled by its crew off Montevideo, displaced 10,000 tons. The two cruisers Blücher and Karlsruhe, which were sunk in the Norwegian campaign, together displaced 16,000 tons. Adding 10 German destroyers, which also were lost in Norwegian waters, and a number of torpedo boats, minesweepers, and other smaller craft, the remaining 20,000 tons would account for German U-boat losses. New York, January 10th. A Domai Japanese news agency broadcast from Tokyo today said the cabinet approved an Army and Navy proposal for tightening the nation's air defenses. London, January 10th. The Prime Minister's office today announced that Lord Lloyd, Secretary of State for Colonies, would replace Lord Halifax as leader of the government party in the House of Lords. Halifax, former Foreign Secretary, is Ambassador Designate to the United States. Vichy, France, January 10th. The question of Paris' food supply for the moment preoccupies the Pétain government. Paris is cold and hungry, according to reports received here. Today it was officially announced that the practice of levying a tax on food entering Paris from the country has been modified and that any food taxes levied will be covered by states' subvention. Commenting on the Paris food situation, the newspaper Le Journal said Paris must be able to eat. The government accordingly has taken measures to see that Paris suffers no more than the rest of France. 2/3 of our territory is occupied. We also are blockaded. We are in the midst of a especially rigorous winter which has increased communication difficulties. Franco-German relations, meanwhile, are without change. Rumors have been spread about further cabinet changes, but none have occurred. Berlin, January 10th. Germany and Russia signed a series of treaties today in Moscow, including a new trade agreement designed to aid Germany's war effort and involving many billions of marks, it was officially announced. Other agreements recognize trade deals which Germany previously had signed with the Baltic states of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, which now are absorbed by the Soviet Union and provided for the regulation of border and population resettlement problems. The official German news agency DNB said the trade agreement included the greatest grain deal in history and had been worked out so carefully on the basis of a scientific study of the capacities of the two countries that the transaction could be called an economic plan as well as a deal. Negotiations have been underway since last October based on treaties signed February 11, 1940. Under the terms of the new treaty regulating commerce between the two countries until August 1st, 1942, Germany will provide Russia with an expanded list of manufactured items such as industrial machinery in return for petroleum ores, cotton, naphtha products, and various foodstuffs, particularly grain. Moscow, January 10th. Russia agreed today to send Germany quantities of food, especially grains, in a significant collaboration officially described as an enlarged economic agreement. TASS, official Russian news agency, said the new agreement constitutes a further stage in the execution of the economic program outlined by the two governments in 1939. It said the negotiations passed in the spirit of mutual understanding and confidence, conforming to the friendly relations existing between the USSR and Germany. A repatriation accord signed at the same time was expected to return to the Reich 40,000 Germans in Lithuania and 10,000 in Latvia and Estonia. Buenos Aires, Argentina, January 10th. Informed sources reported tonight that a Soviet trade mission was en route here to negotiate a giant trade agreement based mainly on the export of Argentine grain to Russia. Berlin, January 10th. The presence of United States Ambassador Admiral William D. Leahy in Vichy was interpreted by authorized German quarters today as a step to attenuate the bad impression of the United States and France over the lack of ample food relief from America. The shipments of condensed milk from America were regarded as merely a drop of water on a hot tile. The American Red Cross has obtained permission from Britain to send milk to occupied France. Chongqing, China, January 10th. Chinese quarters declared tonight that the early arrival of American war supplies might spell the difference between success or failure in the event considered likely that Japan should launch a tremendous new offensive against Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek's Chinese armies. A high Chinese official declared China's need of supplies from the United States was equally, if not more urgent than British requirements. However, he said the latest expressions of American policy were a source of great encouragement to the Chinese government, particularly the equal rating accorded the European and Asiatic wars and the view that China is playing an important role in the struggle against aggression. The Chongqing newspaper Da Kung Pao did some figuring today and decided that the United States Navy is 322 times more powerful than the Japanese Navy. The editorial writer figured that the present American naval budget is 322 times the net Japanese naval budget based on the rate of unofficial dealings in the yen. The fate of the Japanese Empire lies in President Roosevelt's hands, the writer elaborated. The Japanese Navy can be wiped out when he decides. Tokyo, January 10th. Although official circles remain silent today on President Roosevelt's budget message, the press and some diplomatic quarters vision aggression in connection with the proposal to strengthen the American fleet and bases in the Pacific. This proposal, it was held here, is aimed at breaking Japan's domination in the Western Pacific. Such a move, it was maintained, exceeds the bounds of preparedness and plainly indicates aggressive intentions. The newspaper Tokyo Asahi commented that American moves in aid of Britain, Greece, and China and the strengthening of American land, sea, and air forces were being carried out carefully in an effort to complete the necessary measures for competition against the totalitarian camp. Malvern, England, January 10th. The Archbishop of York's Church Conference meeting here declared today that private ownership of the nation's main industrial resources may be a stumbling block to Christianity, making it more difficult for men to lead Christian lives. A document embodying the conference's ideas that while these resources can be so owned, men will strive for their ownership. As a consequence, the way of life founded on the supremacy of the economic motive will remain, which is contrary to God's plan for mankind. The time has come for Christians to proclaim the need for striving toward a form of society in which, while the essential values of the individual and human personality are preserved, a continuance of these abuses no longer will be possible. The document pointed out that the church could never commit itself to any proposed change in the structure of society as being a self-sufficient means of salvation. In our present situation, it added, we believe the maintenance of that part of our society by which the ultimate ownership of the principal industrial resources of the community can be vested in the hands of private owners may be a stumbling block. The Bishop of Malmesbury said he hoped the Economic Declaration would become the basis for a united assertion by all Christian churches. Paris, December 21st, via Berlin, delayed. 14 prisoners, including 5 Canadians and 9 from British dominions who are in custody in St. Denis military barracks today, were ordained in St. Denis Chapel, where the kings of France are buried. The prisoners marched to the basilica in soldier fashion, accompanied by German troopers. The Canadians sat in a choir during the ceremony, while the other prisoners found places between huge stacks of sandbags put up to protect the king's tombs. Ottawa, Ontario, January 10th. The Canadian government today ordered the training of 100,000 war workers annually to meet estimated industrial war production needs. This compares with 26,000 who were specially trained last year. About half of the 1941 trainees will be accommodated in vocational schools and the remainder in war industries. The order is based on findings of the Interdepartmental Committee made public today by Labor Minister Norman A. McClarty, which revealed the need for 75,700 additional workers as well as 117,200 men for the Canadian Armed Forces. It is planned to expand the Navy by 5,400 men, the Army by 80,000, and the Air Force by 31,800. These planned additions to Canada's fighting units will bring the Dominion's armed forces to nearly 470,000 by the end of the year. The Army now stands at about 300,000, of whom 175,000 are on active service. The Air Force, now totaling 35,000, will be brought to 66,800 this year, and the Navy will be increased from 15,000 to 20,400. According to the committee's survey, about 150,000 workers are employed on war contracts, and 225,000 will be so employed at the end of the year, with an ever-ascending scale of war production anticipated. Windsor, Ontario, January 10th. George Burt of Oshawa, Regional Director of the United Automobile Workers of America, today paid fines totaling $1,650 for 47 former Chrysler Motor Corporation employees convicted of loitering in the vicinity of an essential industry. The men were arrested under the Defense of Canada regulations last November when they attempted to walk in a picket line during a dispute between company officials and some of the workers. Rome, January 10th. Giuseppe Tassinari, Italy's Minister of Agriculture and Food Dictator, today ordered a census of all stocks of essential foodstuffs, including wheat, corn, flour, spaghetti, rice, olive oil, butter, and lard, to provide the government with a basis for further rationing of these foods. Rome, January 9th. Shoe manufacturers were ordered today to conserve leather by using substitutes wherever possible. The use of leather was prohibited for toe caps, backstays, insoles, and in heels, except for the bottom layer. New York, January 10th. As many civilians already have been killed in the present European war as during the entire 4 years of the World War, and the proportion of civilian to military fatalities is tragically higher, statisticians of the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company reported today. During the World War, 1 civilian was killed for every 75 military fatalities. Since the outbreak of hostilities in 1939, for every 3 military fatalities, 1 civilian has lost his life. Already, the civilian deaths in the present war exceed 100,000, as against 300,000 deaths in the armed forces. During the World War, British civilian deaths in air raids numbered 1,117. In the present conflict, up to November 1940, Britain has reported the death of 20,000 civilians in air raids. Hey guys, if you enjoy this channel, check out our companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. Over there, you will hear radio broadcasts of the newsmakers, the news reporters, and various entertainment programs, comedy, drama, horror, all kinds of fun stuff. And you will also get the number one song every Friday that is represented on that channel as the radio programs correspond with the newspapers that you hear. Each upload premieres the same night the newspaper premieres that you are listening to right now. We even feature movie serials and classic movies on there when YouTube permits it. So swing over to the World War II Old Time Radio channel and click on that bell icon to subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well and click on that bell icon. I know you'll enjoy them. And back to national news. Honolulu, territory of Hawaii, January 10th. Rear Admiral Husband E. Kimmel, new Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleets, told a press conference today his appointment came as a big surprise and added, "I will do my utmost to carry on the efficient work of my distinguished predecessors and to continue to increase the effectiveness of the fleet to enable it to be ready to support immediately the national policies of the United States whenever called upon to do so." Referring to a sentence in President Roosevelt's recent fireside chat, he said, "I am in no position to comment whether the fleet is able to move toward Asia immediately." You must use your own interpretation regarding the president's remark. In his fireside chat, the president said the German and Italian fleets were being blocked on the other side of the Atlantic by the British and the Greeks. The Japanese were being engaged in Asia by the Chinese, and after a dramatic pause, in the Pacific is our fleet. Washington, D.C., January 10th. Admitting that one of the 8 naval and air bases acquired from the British in exchange for 50 destroyers was not very satisfactory, Rear Admiral John H. Towers, Chief of the Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics, today refused to divulge further information concerning the sites. Admiral Towers told the House Naval Affairs Committee that the information sought by Representative W. Sterling Cole, Republican, New York, was confidential and could not be stated publicly. He offered to make a private report to the committee. The Admiral's statement supported reports that the British have not been giving the United States the best available sites in their possessions for the use of aircraft and fighting ships. Although Admiral Towers did not name the unsatisfactory base, he referred to it was said that the proposed airplane landing field in one island contained a swamp in its area. The British thus far have refused to yield up land in the island more suitable for a landing field. A month ago, published reports disclosed that British officials on this side of the Atlantic were refusing stubbornly to grant the United States sites its desired bases let me read that again. A month ago, published reports disclosed that British officials on this side of the Atlantic were refusing stubbornly to grant the United States its desired for bases on Trinidad, a key Panama Canal defense. They were said to be insisting that the United States accept more or less uninhabited swamplands on the island off the Venezuelan coast instead of the air defense center sought on the higher ground of the island's western side. Representative Cole asked Admiral Towers regarding the use made by the Navy of the $10 million appropriated by Congress for establishment of bases outside the United States. The witness also declined to discuss this matter publicly, saying he would comment upon it in a confidential report. Los Angeles, California, January 10th. Edsel Ford, president of the Ford Company, today concluded 3 days of surveying aircraft production methods in Southern California with the announcement that prospects for his company building assemblies for 1,200 huge bombers looks excellent. Until a staff of engineers complete a technical analysis of problems involved in turning automobile facilities to aeronautical uses, Ford said he preferred to withhold definite commitment on the giant program. Right now, Ford said, I'd say the chances of our meeting the demand for 1,200 four-engined bomber assemblies look excellent. However, manufacturing these planes, consolidated B-24 bombers, will require addition of much brand new tooling equipment to our Detroit plants. We must first evolve a suitable factory layout. Probably if we decide we can handle larger production, we'll have to erect a new plant near our River Rouge Automobile Center. Miami, Florida, January 10th. Colonel G. DeFries Larner, General Manager of the National Aeronautic Association, largest aviation group in the United States, today told the Miami Kiwanis Club that the United States is to spend more than $50 million of the taxpayers' money on out-of-date airplane engines. Speaking during the 3-day midwinter air show at Miami's Municipal Airport, Larner said this country has radial air-cooled engines far in advance of the 1,200 horsepower British Rolls-Royce engine to be produced by an automobile company. He criticized the Allison 1,100 horsepower liquid-cooled airplane engine being fitted to the Army's new Curtiss Pursuits as a 5-year-old model. This country, Larner said, has 2,000 horsepower engines already in production, and the European belligerents are basing their spring and summer aviation plans on new engines of that power. He said, "We talk of an Army Air Force of 25,000 airplanes and a Naval Air Force of half that number. There are no airports to handle even 20,000 warplanes." Plans for further expansion of the aviation industry were disclosed yesterday. In Washington, the War Department announced new plants and additions totaling $18 million, and in Detroit, K.T. Keller, president of the Chrysler Corporation, told of a tentative agreement for his company's participation in airplane construction. Meantime, Chicago companies were given comparatively small defense orders. The War Department said that President Roosevelt has approved expansion of the aircraft facilities of the Curtiss Propeller Division of the Curtiss-Wright Corporation at an estimated cost of $14,090,350. The plans call for a new plant at Pittsburgh and enlargement of plants at Indianapolis and Caldwell, New Jersey. The president also approved construction of a new plant by Ohio Crankshaft Incorporated at Cleveland to cost an estimated $3,968,130 for the manufacture of Wright airplane crankshafts. New York, January 10th. Former Governor Alfred E. Smith declared tonight that the big question facing the United States was whether or not, without declaring war, we can get wartime production. In a broadcast address under the auspices of the Committee to Defend America by Aiding the Allies, he asserted that up to the present time, our people generally have not taken the situation seriously enough. They do not seem to realize that the era of business as usually conducted is over, and that ordinary easygoing living and peacetime pursuits must yield to defense, he said. The former governor said that the government at Washington must set up an efficient, powerful, responsible defense organization. The president must be prepared to delegate authority in the same way that President Wilson delegated it in 1917. Washington, D.C., January 10th. Nearly 3,300 workers employed in the construction of the cantonment at nearby Fort George Meade, Maryland, have been discharged in the past 2 weeks. The discharges were ordered by Major J.A. Noxon, construction quartermaster at the fort, and followed an inspection by Lieutenant Colonel Brehan B. Somerville, recently appointed construction quartermaster of the Army. Half of the men discharged were carpenters. Complaints had been made that union officials were giving union cards to inexperienced men in order to collect the $55 fee for initiation into the carpenters' union. The men who have been let go were either too lazy to produce or were physically or mentally incapable of producing, Major Noxon said. Employment of men on the cantonment reached a peak of 19,000 during the Christmas season. More experienced men are needed now, it was said. New Haven, Connecticut, January 10th. The first Garand semi-automatic Army rifle produced by private industry rolled off the assembly line at the Winchester Repeating Arms Company today and was presented to Major General C.M. Wesson of Washington, Chief of the Army Ordnance Department. The weapon, heretofore produced only at the Federal Arsenal in Springfield, Massachusetts, was the first of 65,000 to be manufactured at the Winchester plant under an $8,710,000 contract. John C. Garand of Springfield inventor of the gun, and several high-ranking War Department officers heard General Wesson term it the most effective combat rifle in the world. Edwin S. Pugsley, Winchester vice president, said the first gun was completed almost 3 months ahead of schedule and that the firm would soon be turning out $5,000 a month. Many business leaders yesterday expressed the belief that the national defense spending may leave in its wake serious problems in this country. The aftermath of the defense spending prosperity, they said, probably would be marked by an enormous tax burden, widespread unemployment, and numerous idle plants. Some industrial executives reported that they were too busy coping with present problems to hazard any predictions. Others, however, outlined plans of action that may serve to cushion adverse effects when the bottom falls out of defense prosperity. Several suggested that the government give domestic industry a freer hand so that it can keep in step with the development of defense production. Others agreed that industries should be planning for new lines of goods through more research work to take up the slack which they said is bound to come. Charles E. Wilson, president of the General Electric Company, asserted last night that American business was not tackling the defense work as a source of additional profits, but rather as a necessary undertaking for welfare of the country. He spoke before some 300 utility executives at a Midwestern sales conference in the Stevens Hotel. The desire for profits must be subordinated, he said. I believe that all that industry has asked or will ask in the future is to be allowed to carry out the tremendous task of furnishing the essential qualities of defense materials with only a minimum of profit, or at least without a loss. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, January 10th. Federal Judge George A. Welsh declared today, I feel like Pontius Pilate, and then sentenced a 31-year-old minister to a year and a day in prison for failing to register for the draft. The minister, Arleigh Brooke, heard the sentence with a smile after he told a crowd that packed the courtroom, the United States is adopting a system of conscription which may produce tyranny instead of freedom. I am not evading the draft. I am opposing it. I am defending democracy. The people of America are filled with fear of an invasion. Are we so morally weak that the power of one man could control 130 million free people? Judge Welsh told Brooks, I know you are motivated by your conscience, and added, America is not normal today, and you must be charitable to the rest of us. I must obey the law no matter how much it hurts me or even if it means my own life. Washington, D.C., January 10th. Senator Charles W. Tobey, Republican, New Hampshire, declared today that Oliver A. Quayle, general manager of the Democratic National Committee, was guilty of perjury in testimony before the Senate Campaign Investigating Committee about loans to Democratic groups by R.J. Reynolds. Reynolds, of the wealthy North Carolina tobacco family, told the committee today that he had loaned $300,000 to help re-elect President Roosevelt, and that the loans were arranged by William Johnson, finance director of the Democratic National Committee. Quayle testified yesterday that he had arranged $275,000 of the Reynolds loan. Reynolds said that Quayle told him that today he was confused about this. Tobey commented that any man with the mental capacity to become general manager of one of the great political parties knows what he testifies to under oath before a Senate committee. When he sits down here and makes a statement that later is thrown out the window, the senator continued, that somebody is guilty of perjury. Let's get down to brass tacks. It's disgraceful. Chairman Guy M. Gillette, Democrat, Iowa, interrupted the state to say the perjury statement was a pretty strong conclusion. Gillette agreed that Quayle should be recalled before the group. Senator Lister Hill, Democrat, Alabama, demanded that the committee also call large contributors to the Republican campaign funds, including the DuPonts, the Pugh family, and the Rockefeller family. Hill said a compilation by committee clerks showed that the DuPonts had contributed $60,350 to various Republican and Wilkie groups, and that the Pugh family of Philadelphia had given $91,025, the Rockefeller family $30,500, and Edgar Monsanto Quinn of St. Louis, Missouri, $18,000. Chairman Gillette said the committee probably could not subpoena all large Republican contributors and complete its report to the Senate by the end of the month. Washington, D.C., January 10th. Creation of another TVA to be known as the Arkansas Valley Authority was proposed today in identical bills introduced in the Senate by Senator John E. Miller and Hattie W. Caraway, Democrat, Arkansas, and the House Representative Clyde T. Ellis. Representative Ellis said the legislation was drafted at the direction of President Roosevelt and that the president has indicated he favor its immediate passage. No definite appropriation is fixed in the bills, but the authority would be given to the right to issue up to $100 million in bonds to acquire existing systems. New York, January 10th. A 58-year-old Romanian Jew accused by the government of acting as financial agent for high-ranking Germans in espionage work and propaganda was sentenced today to 2 years in prison and fined $2,500 for passport fraud. He is Isidore Lazarus, who Assistant United States Attorney Richard J. Burke said had transferred large sums of money from Germany for Marshal Hermann Goering, Dr. Paul J. Goebbels, Minister of Propaganda, Hjalmar Schacht, ex-Minister of Economics, and other German officials. The gray-haired defendant pleaded guilty but insisted that while he was on friendly terms with Reich leaders, it was solely for the purpose of aiding victims of persecution, Jews, Catholics, and Protestants alike. Burke said that Lazarus, according to his own story, said that he had been engaged in international exchange under the name of Lee Lane since 1933 when the Nazis came into power in Germany and was a close friend of German leaders. The government charged that Lazarus took money out of Germany in behalf of Goering, Schacht, and Robert Ley, labor minister, entered New York on a false passport in June 1939 and later deposited a total of $138,000 in cash and securities in 3 New York banks. Burke said the defendant insisted that he had used his connections to help refugees get a small percentage of their money out of Germany, but Burke added most of their funds remained in Germany and probably wound up in the pockets of German officials. As Burke completed his charges, Lazarus stood up in court. "Give me the opportunity and I'll bring the big men from Europe to prove that 3 insinuations as far as my motives are concerned are false," he said. "I have given thousands and thousands of dollars to aid refugees of my own race, as well as Catholics and Protestants. Send me to jail if you want, but let me clear myself of these aspersions." The government said Lazarus first came to this country in 1900 and that since 1923 he had obtained and used 7 passports. Official records showed the court was informed that Lazarus was convicted twice in this country for operating confidence games. The indictment said he was born in Romania in 1882, but that in obtaining a passport through the American consul in Berlin in 1937, he stated he was born in 1887 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Lazarus used this passport when he came to this country in 1939. Kansas City, Kansas, January 10th. A railroad executive who said his invalid wife often begged me to put her out of her misery was arrested today after she was found in bed fatally wounded by a revolver bullet. The husband, John E. Rockwell, 64 years old, was charged with murdering his 62-year-old wife, Elizabeth, to whom he had been married for 39 years. Rockwell is Secretary-Treasurer of the Kansas City, Kaw Valley and Western Railroad. "I believed her disease to be incurable, and I could not stand watching her suffer any longer," Rockwell was quoted by T.P. Palmer, Wyandotte County Deputy Attorney, as relating. "Without waking her, I gently placed the muzzle against her head just behind the right ear and pulled the trigger." Miami, Florida, January 10th. The Flivver Parade swooped into the city's airport today to find that their Sportsman's Flyers race meeting had been changed into a demonstration of military air power at an air base. Their 65-horsepower puddle jumpers were dwarfed by deadly Navy dive bombers and 13-ton long-range patrol planes that now make this field their home. Instead of exhibitions by non-professional airmen, the main events of the show were military. Service flyers demonstrated the dive bombing technique first perfected by the American Navy, but in the current war put to devastating use by the German Air Force and Army. Then they showed how high-altitude planes could drop missiles on Miami when visually out of sight. The racing in the little ships was entirely secondary. Even the stunt flying was military in character. as Don Strummel, the announcer, informed the 8,000 Miamians and winter visitors who filled the stands. The stunting is part of the regular curriculum of every military pilot and the potential Army flyers now being trained in the government's college pilot training schools. Loops, rolls, inverted maneuvering, and combination of these basic stunts that once brought merely admiring gasps from spectators were silently studied by all the watchers. Strummel informed all that these were tricks employed by the British Hurricane and Spitfire flyers to beat off the German air raiders over England. Target of the dive bombers was a cardboard replica of Miami's skyline erected half a mile east of the grandstands. The enemy was a squadron of 9 biplane fighters. The high-pitched whine of their motors, the ear-splitting racket of their propellers as they rolled into 4,000-foot near vertical dives was the first announcement of their coming. Singly, in threes, and finally en masse, the little bullet-like ships slid down an invisible track to drop practice bombs on the city. Realistic explosions produced by an efficient ground crew scattered in dugouts and dense smoke completed the illusion. The big Army ships came and went all afternoon, but gave one illustration of their tactics by dropping practice bombs to a white line ring on the field from about 10,000 feet. The Douglas B-18S planes with a 96-foot wingspread and two 1,200 horsepower motors were mere specks, but the black bombs filled with water hurtled down, striking in and around the target. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, January 10th. Joe Penner, whose clowning on radio, stage, and screen made millions laugh, died today. The 35-year-old fun maker, he made Wanna Buy a Duck and You Nasty Man national bywords, was found dead in bed in his hotel near Philadelphia's Locust Theater, where he had been playing the lead role in Yokel Boy, a stage show. Deputy Coroner Bernard Dugan said death apparently was due to a heart attack. However, an autopsy was ordered. Penner's wife found his body at about 3:30 p.m. Chicago time. He had gone to bed about noon, but had not complained of illness. Robert Crawford, general manager of Yokel Boy, telephoned Mrs. Penner asking her to awaken Penner. She left the receiver off the hook and went into the bedroom. In a moment, she was back and screamed to Crawford, "Get a doctor at once." Mrs. Penner is the former Mae Vaught. She was a dancer in Joe's first New York show. Crawford said that after the performance last night, Martha Ray, the screen comedian who had come from New York to visit the Penners, went to a restaurant with them. When the Penners returned to their apartment, Joe telephoned Crawford at 3 a.m., and Crawford said he seemed to be feeling fine and in the best of spirits. Penner remarked to Crawford, "Wasn't it a swell show tonight? The more I play the part, the better I like it." Penner was born in a small town near Budapest, Hungary on November 11, 1905. His real name was Pinter. He was brought to this country when he was 9 years old and was taken to Detroit, Michigan. Penner started his theatrical career by entering amateur contests in Detroit, where his father was employed in a motor factory. For a time, Joe himself worked first as a messenger and then as a clerk in the Ford factory. His first real stage job was that of a mind reader's assistant. Several sessions in carnivals, burlesques, and vaudeville followed before Penner got his first break, a job in the Greenwich Village Follies at $375 a week in 1926. He made his first radio appearance on the Rudy Valley program in 1933 and was an immediate success. 4 weeks later, he was given a show of his own and won popularity the first year. He also appeared in several motion pictures. Des Moines, Iowa, January 10th. 4 years ago, Harry D. Jones, an artist for the Iowa Federal Works Progress Administration, began painting a mural in the children's room at the Des Moines Public Library. Today, with the work only about two-thirds completed, several library officials asserted that the mural is grotesque and distorted and frightens children to the extent that some of them have been forbidden by their parents to visit the library. Jones is now head of the WPA Art Project in Iowa, employing 240 persons, about 50 of whom are engaged in easel and mural painting and sculpture. In 1936, while working independently on his own time, he painted a picture of a frozen horse which caused a furor in statewide Iowa circles because of its morbidity. This same morbidity, library officials said, is evident in portions of the children's room mural, which purports to show progressive stages in Iowa history. One section of the mural is said to be painted over on the demand of library trustees who regarded it as an unnecessary slur on the state. This section pictured a lemon growing out of an acorn and was illustrative of the artist's conception that traffic development on the Des Moines River had failed and became a lemon. Three other sorry, Three other panels of the mural have attracted attention and criticism. The first one shows in the center Indians at a feast, but the three figures at the left are regarded as particularly offensive to children. We don't know exactly what it means, said Mrs. Bernice Hadley, one of those in charge in the children's room. It probably shows how the Indians take care of their own social problems. The children are a little scared, however, of the grim expression on the face of the kneeling old woman. The second panel shows Indians being driven from their homes by soldiers and settlers with wigwams in flames. Children ordinarily like pictures of Indians, said Miss May Anders, chief assistant librarian, but they don't like this picture. The figures of the Indians are distorted, and the whole scene is one of needless horror, particularly when it is considered that some of the boys and girls who come to the room are only 6 years old. The third panel is a puzzler to Miss Hadley and Miss Anders. It probably represents the types of settlers who came to Iowa, Miss Anders said, but it certainly doesn't depict our children's ancestors in a flattering light. At the appearance of the cow and horse is, to say the least, brusque. Children don't know whether to laugh or cry when they look at this panel. The whole conception of the mural is grotesque. I detest it. It's not fit for a children's room. I have heard of parents who took one look at the mural and told their children not to go back to the room. We wish Mr. Jones would clean up his mess so we could use the room for our regular programs. Forrest Spalding, chief librarian, said the mural has been criticized severely as being distorted. Of course, it's an example of the modern cartoon school of art, he said, and the criticisms have come from conservative artists. Jones, according to other library attaches, is so busy with his work as head of the state art project that he doesn't put in more than a few hours a week on the mural. Miss Hadley told of an occasion when Jones' daughter, Belva, 5 years old, came with him to view the mural. She pointed at one group of Indians, Miss Hadley said, and remarked, "Aren't those funny-looking animals, Daddy?" Hey guys, if you enjoy this channel, check out our companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. Over there, you will hear radio broadcasts of the newsmakers, the news reporters, and various entertainment programs, comedy, drama, horror, all kinds of fun stuff. And you will also get the number one song every Friday that is represented on that channel as the radio programs correspond with the newspapers that you hear. Each upload premieres the same night the newspaper premieres that you are listening to right now. We even feature movie serials and classic movies on there when YouTube permits it. So swing over to the World War II Old Time Radio channel and click on that bell icon to subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well and click on that bell icon. I know you'll enjoy them. And now for local and regional news. Number one object and job of the National Defense Commission is to spread the great bulk of defense orders among business enterprises located between the Appalachian and Rocky Mountains, Dr. William L. Batt, Deputy Commissioner of the Industrial Materials Division of the Defense Advisory Commission, said last night. Speaking before more than 300 industrial engineers from the Chicago area at the Palmer House, Dr. Batt said the commission had found it desirable for economic, social, and defense reasons to award defense contracts to businesses in the Middle West. There has been considerable criticism that so much defense business went into the East, Dr. Batt said. When you go out to buy emergency materials, you go to the industry that has had some experience in manufacturing them. That is why early orders went to manufacturers located in the coastal areas. They were experienced in making powder, building planes, and forging shells. Agriculture in the Middle West has lost its export markets and must find new means of livelihood. Therefore, for economic reasons, the Commission feels these areas should have new industries. Spread of the defense contracts is socially desirable because it will halt a migration from the agricultural areas to the industrial. However, defense and safety are the principal reasons why we want to award as many contracts as possible to Midwestern industry. The Commission is doing away with competitive bidding on defense contracts and is replacing it with a process of negotiation. Dr. Batts said it was asking manufacturers in a given area to name the price they must have to build the materials. Then the Commission can award the contracts intelligently, he said. He attributed the new method of awarding defense contracts to a plan outlined by Donald Nelson, Executive Vice President of Sears Roebuck and Company Chicago, and now Administrator of Priorities with the Commission. 120 members of the 184th Field Artillery Regiment Negro Unit of the Illinois National Guard left over the Illinois Central Railroad yesterday for a year's training at Camp Custer, Michigan. Lieutenant Colonel Oscar Randall was in command. The regiment was organized last September from Chicago's former 8th Infantry. The second contingent of men in the 184th will leave next week for Camp Custer. 250 men last night began a special 3-month course in military science in the University of Chicago Fieldhouse. The course is sponsored by the Fort Sheridan Special CMTC Battalion Association in cooperation with the university and business and professional men who received a month's training at Fort Sheridan last fall. The course is designed to give basic military training to young men who may be called for draft service and for older men who may be available for home defense. Last night, the men engaged in special drill throwing dummy grenades and rifle range practice. Governor John Stell, who is to go out of office on Monday, granted full pardons last night to 11 former convicts. He also granted a conditional pardon to another former convict and commuted the sentences of 4 men now in prison. In December, Stell also pardoned 5 men who fired a volley of rifle shells into the home of a deputy sheriff in DuQuoin and killed a girl 14 years old. These men were members of a miners' union. The action yesterday followed a mass exodus from the state's prisons in November and December, a total of 391 inmates having been granted paroles by the Governor's Board of Pardons and Paroles. Many of the paroled were known to the Chicago police as crime repeaters. Governor-elect Dwight H. Green, his wife, and their 2 children will leave Chicago at 4:50 p.m. tomorrow on the Abraham Lincoln of the Alton Road for the inauguration ceremonies Monday in Springfield. They will spend the night at the Abraham Lincoln Hotel in Springfield. Others who will make up the Green Party are Carl Lee, Chicago manufacturer, and his wife and their son, Carl Jr., Ben Berv, chairman of the Republican State Central Committee, and his wife, and John T. Dempsey, chairman of the Cook County Republican Central Committee, and his wife. Accompanying the governor will be Green's sister, Mrs. Arlo Shearer, her son, Robert, Miss Lillian Harris, head of the Harris School, where the Green children are enrolled, Miss Sally Sitterly of the Harris School, Mrs. C.L. Silvis, in charge of women's activities during the campaign, Mrs. Bertha Bauer, Republican National Committee woman for Illinois, Mrs. Constance Lloyd, Green's personal secretary, her brother, William Fair Watkins, Green campaign manager, and his wife. Others in the Green Party are his Uncle John and the following personal friends: Edward F. Keebler and his elves, sorry I had to say that, and his mother, Mr. and Mrs. Harry Dubia, and Mr. and Mrs. A.D. Plamondon, Jr. Springfield, Illinois, January 10th. An answer to the universal question in Springfield all this week was found today when a reporter gained possession of a tabulation showing the allotment of seats for the state inauguration ceremonies in the State Armory here next Monday. Who's got the seats was the question that inevitably wound up a search for tickets that reached its height with the convening of the new General Assembly last Wednesday and has continued unabated. The demand is the greatest ever witnessed here because of the return of the Republicans to power. Tormented officials say that the crowd would be big enough to pack the Chicago Stadium if it could be moved here, and add mournfully that the state's armory, where the ceremonies will be held, will not hold more than 5,200 seats for which tickets have been printed, allotted, and distributed. There just won't be any more, they insist. While there have been some changes since the schedule was adopted originally, some of the principals in the show having been deprived of some tickets with the presentation of new requests that had to be recognized, the tabulation revealed today shows there was difficulty in making the supply go around as first planned. Indianapolis, Indiana, January 10th. Forces of Glenn R. Hillis, Republican loser in the November 5th election for governor, have set about winning over the Republican State Central Committee, which will decide Monday whether to support a proposed contest of the election of Henry F. Schrickner, a Democrat. The legislature, overwhelmingly Republican, and with the sole power under the Indiana Constitution to conduct the contest, has received advanced copies of a contest petition from former Judge Virgil E. Whitaker of Hammond. Whitaker has amassed voluminous evidence of voting by Lake County aliens November 5th. Because of a variety of factors, the action that will be taken by the state committee is now in doubt. Friends of Hillis believe that the committee cannot fail to back up the contest. Hillis lost by only 3,963 votes, and the invalidation of returns from 6 Lake County precincts would make him the winner. There are 25 members of the committee. Jefferson City, Missouri, January 11th. The General Assembly voted early today to keep Forrest C. Donnell, a Republican, out of the governor's chair and to set up a machinery for an investigation of last November's gubernatorial election. By a vote of 101 to 78, the Joint Assembly adopted a majority committee report drafted by Democrats to certify the election of all last November's apparent winners except Donnell. The adopted report will keep the governorship open until the Assembly has had an opportunity to examine Democratic charges of fraud, look into ballot boxes, and determine the winner between Donnell and Lawrence McDaniel, Democrat of St. Louis. 6 Democrats, 3 from each chamber, signed the report based on preliminary investigation of returns, which gave Donnell a plurality of 3,613 over McDaniel. 4 Republicans on the committee refused to sign the report. Mayor Kelly left the city yesterday to rejoin his family at their winter home in Miami Beach, Florida. The mayor had taken his family south during the holidays. He remained only a few days, then returning to Chicago Tuesday to preside over the budget meetings of the city council. A contract was signed yesterday between the CIO, United Automobile Workers, and the International Harvester Company to bring an end to the strike at the company's Fort Wayne, Indiana truck works. It was announced that 3,500 employees would go back to work Monday. The strike was called December 31st when the union made additional demands after negotiating with the company since last May. 2 judges made rulings yesterday which bewildered Miss Mary Sullivan, 28 years old, 3022 Broadway, a waitress. She was charged with driving without a license after she was found at the wheel of a stalled automobile in the Loop Thursday. Her companion, John Attella, 32 of 4947 Medill Street, a waiter and owner of the car, was asleep, and Miss Sullivan said she was driving because he had been drinking. Said Judge John Gutneck in the traffic court, "You've got to have a license to drive no matter what excuse. The fine will be $5 and $1 court costs." Said Judge John T. Zuris in South State Street Court a few minutes later as he dismissed the charge of disorderly conduct against Attella. "It would have been unsafe for him to drive, Miss Sullivan. You should be commended for what you did." The Chicago Crime Commission will expand its activities beginning next week in an effort to help solve Chicago's murders, it was announced yesterday. On Monday, a trained investigator will be assigned to the coroner's office to inquire into all suspicious deaths and murders. He will attend all murder inquests. R.W. Dvorak, Assistant Operating Director of the Crime Commission, who announced the plan, said that 17 out of every 100 murders in Chicago go unsolved each year. At this rate, he said this rate can be reduced by better supervision of inquests. Indianapolis, Indiana, January 10th. Governor Townsend approved tonight a state clemency commission recommendation that D.C. Stephenson, former Indiana Ku Klux Klan Grand Dragon, be denied parole from the life sentence on which he has served 15 years for the slaying of Miss Madge Oberholzer in Indiana. I have made it a policy to abide by my Clemency Commission's recommendations, Townsend said. I am following it in this case. Stephenson, who once was credited with having said, I am the law in Indiana, was convicted in November 1925. Miss Oberholzer took poison on a trip to Hammond with Stephenson after he allegedly had raped her. She died after being brought back to Indianapolis. The state charged the Klan leader with having failed to provide medical attention for her. Since his conviction, Stephenson has sought repeatedly to gain a new trial. The inquest yesterday into the death of Mrs. Sarah Ernest, 42 years old, of 2116 North Avers Avenue, who was killed Thursday when the sidewalk collapsed in front of 6 South Oakley Boulevard, was continued until February 11th for further investigation into the cause of the accident. 2 other women were injured in the cave-in. Charles Weiss of 2317 Washington Boulevard, who witnessed the sidewalk collapse from across the street, testified that the sidewalk slabs had been loose for the last 8 or 9 years and that one of the slabs had been cracked. Warnings that increased tax loads for Chicago and Cook County property owners will result in increasingly smaller collections, accentuate the movement of the population out of the city and county, and possibly cause the tax system to collapse of its own weight, were given to the members of the school board yesterday during a public hearing on the 1941 school budget in the city council chambers. Typical of the opinions expressed by representatives of nearly 50 civic organizations, women's clubs, taxpayer groups, and parent-teacher associations was the statement of Newton C. Farr, vice president of the Civic Federation and Bureau of Public Efficiency. Enabling legislation has been drafted for the construction of 222.2 mile system of Cook County toll superhighways at a cost which is estimated at $285 million. A copy of a bill to be introduced at Springfield this month was made public yesterday by Major George A. Quinlan, Cook County Highway Superintendent. The proposed law would create a highway authority, a quasi-public corporation which would build, maintain, and operate toll roads. For the initial construction, the authority could issue bonds not to exceed $30 million to be retired with toll collections. The contemplated toll would be 10 cents for passenger cars, 25 cents for trucks. Quinlan said the estimated revenue would be adequate to pay for the bonds in 15 years. The retirement period would be 40 years, however, so revenue in excess of the long-term bond requirements could be used to extend the system. The Highway Authority would consist of one man, the Superintendent of Highways for counties of more than 300,000 population, meaning Cook County. His activities would be supervised by the county board. The bill provides that, at the request of the city council, agreements would be made for the authority to build and to operate toll roads within Chicago. Hey guys, if you enjoy this channel, check out our companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. Over there, you will hear radio broadcasts of the newsmakers, the news reporters, and various entertainment programs, comedy, drama, horror, all kinds of fun stuff. And you will also get the #1 song every Friday that is represented on that channel as the radio programs correspond with the newspapers that you hear. Each upload premieres the same night the newspaper premieres that you are listening to right now. We even feature movie serials and classic movies on there when YouTube permits it. So swing over to the World War II Old Time Radio channel and click on that bell icon to subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well and click on that bell icon. I know you'll enjoy them. And now for sports. Tony Zale, middleweight champion, won a split decision over Steve Mamakos, rugged Washington, D.C. fighter, in an exciting slugging match in the wind-up bout of the opening show of the new year in Chicago Stadium last night. Mamakos held an edge until the 4th round when Zale sent his aggressive rival to the canvas for no count with a left hook to the jaw. This punch sent the Gary Boxer into the lead, but he didn't hold this margin long. After being applauded for his game stand in the next round, Mamakos electrified the 11,064 spectators by taking the play away from the champion in the sixth and winning the round. Mamakos continued to hold the upper hand in the seventh and eighth rounds. In the ninth, however, Zale connected with a series of vicious punches to the head, which dropped Mamakos for no count for the second time during the furious battle. There was no decision of Zale's superiority in the last round. He punched Mamakos at will, except for a brief rally by Steve near the end of the session. Referee Frank Adams voted 55-45, and Judge William O'Connell 54-46 for Zale. Ed Hintz, the other judge, called the non-title match a draw. Net receipts were $18,674, of which Zale will receive 35% and Mamakos 15%. Since the battle was nip and tuck most of the way, Mamakos may be rewarded with a rematch with Zale's championship at stake. Promoter Bill Rand had hoped to have Zale defend his title in the same arena February 21st, but Sam Peon, one of the champion's managers, indicated he would not be available on that date because of the need of rest. Mamakos came out of the bout with cuts over his eye and badly bruised lips, while Zale was unmarked except for puffed eyes. During the intermission, Chairman Joe Trinner of the Illinois Boxing Commission conducted the first ringside weighing-in ceremony since the game was legalized in the state 14 years ago. Wearing ring apparel, Mamakos weighed 161 pounds, Zale 163 1/4. While tickets remain for the Indiana-Illinois clash, by game time another capacity crowd of 7,183 attendance Monday night is anticipated. The Hoosiers will send a veteran squad against Illinois. Captain Marv Huffman was the only major loss by graduation. Indiana also enters the conference season with a most impressive record. It was beaten once, but that 41-39 defeat by Southern California was more than balanced by victories over Stanford, California, and UCLA on the Hoosiers' Western holiday trip. On the way home, Indiana defeated Kentucky in the Sugar Bowl game in New Orleans. Georgia, Butler, and Marshall were other victims. Bill Menke, veteran center, is chief offensive threat to Illinois' hopes. Menke scored 77 points in the non-conference games this year. Forrest Sproul, Purdue forward who turned in a splendid game against Illinois, and Don Blemker, guard, are the mainstays of the Boilermakers. Coach Ward Lambert has experimented with Bob Riley and Fred Crampy, sophomores, this week in an attempt to get control of the ball off the backboards. Mike Sofiak, former high school star from Gary, Indiana, is most formidable of the Wolverine invaders. Despite Michigan's defeat by Ohio State, Purdue fears tonight's result. Michigan has beaten Purdue only 3 times in 12 games since 1929. Last year, Purdue won a defensive game 25-17. Having been completely successful by juggling his lineup before the Michigan game, Coach Harold Olson of Ohio State will stand pat against Northwestern. Fred Miller and Dick Fisher will start at forward. Roger Jorgensen will be at center, replacing Jack McLean, a regular last year, and Jack Graff and Max Gekowitz will be the guards. Fisher has replaced Captain Gil Michelson. Northwestern will open with the same lineup that finished the non-conference games with defeat of Princeton. Russ Wendland and Clarence Haas, sophomores, share the starting honors with Captain Al Butherus, Don Clausen, and Henry Klassen. East Lansing, Michigan, January 10th. Michigan State's basketball 5 continued its winning way tonight with a 25-18 victory over Marquette. The Spartans were trailing 13-9 at halftime, but rallied brilliantly during the second half and rolled up 16 points while Marquette was getting 5 free throws. Loyola University's basketball team will meet unbeaten DeQuinns, and DePaul will face Bradley Tech in a doubleheader program in the Coliseum tonight. DeQuinns scored its 6th victory of the season and its 20th in a row Wednesday night in crushing Carnegie Tech 46-9, while Bradley has not lost a Little 19 conference game in 4 years. Last year, the Quinn scored a 28-27 victory over Loyola, in which a long attempt for a basket by George Wenskus of the Ramblers barely missed as the gun fired to end the game. Both the Paul Bradley games last year were close. Paul McCall of Bradley sank a long basket at a moment before the final gun to win 34-33, a 34-33 decision in the Coliseum. Later in Peoria, DePaul won the right to represent the Midwest in the National Invitational Tournament by beating Bradley in a last-minute rally, 41-39. The most important item in the mail delivered at the White Sox Park yesterday was the contract properly signed of Bill Knickerbocker, the veteran infielder recently taken from the Yankees in exchange for Ken Silvestri, the kid catcher. Knickerbocker, whose big league career now embraces 4 American League clubs, did his pay acceptance job in Whittier, California, where he will remain until March 1st, the date on which he is due to report at the Pasadena training camp. The alumnus of the Indians, Browns, and Yankees was the 25th to sign out of a roster of 34 men, but the fact that Vice President Harry Grabenier has set back the inaugural of his California vacation to January 20th indicates that one or more of the absentees have kicked up a disturbance. Along with Knickerbocker signing, Grabenier let the world know that manager James Dyke has changed his mind about sending 3 of his fat boys on a reducing jaunt without a policeman. Julius Solters, Taft Wright, and Eddie Smith have orders to go to Hot Springs, Arkansas, February 1st for a 3 weeks attention to their respective waistlines. Originally, they were to go unaccompanied, but Coach Mule Haas has been added to the party, and the Mule's job will be to see that the patients take the reducing course seriously. General Manager James T. Gallagher wasn't at all happy about the mail deposited at the Cubs offices yesterday. Only 1 contract arrived, making a total of 7 now signed. It came from Ray Campbell, one of last spring's pitching rookies who was farmed out to Tulsa. Subsequently, he was shipped back to the Cubs because of some sort of muscular complaint. Bloomington, Indiana, January 10th. Ed Hedges of Boonville, senior distance runner on the Indiana University track team, has been called to active duty in the United States Army and will not return to school for the 2nd semester, he said today. Saturday night is movie night. Let's see what is playing in the downtown Chicago movie houses. At the Chicago Theater State near Randolph Street, for romance and thrills, they storm Adventure's High Road. It's Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland in the Santa Fe Trail with Raymond Massey and Ronald Reagan. Warner Brothers smash hit. And on the stage, they're singing away. It's the Four Inks Box with Paul Garrett's Lathrop Brothers and Virginia Lee and Stuart Morgan dancers. And at the Oriental on Randolph near State Street, in person for the first time in Chicago, the brand new A.B. Marcus Show Continental Review. With gorgeous girls and a cast of 50, 1,001 thrills and 3,601 seconds of delight. I can't remember. Sorry, I couldn't read a line of that. It was blurred. And on the screen in its first loop showing Behind the News with Lloyd Nolan and Doris Davenport. And at the State Lake, glorious, uproarious stage and screen fun in person. It's Greg Gordon and his TikTok Rhythm Orchestra plus big vaudeville with Billy Van, Lester Oman, Andrews Trio, Brown and Amos, and Art Perry. And on the screen, All America Wants to See It Again. James Cagney, Pat O'Brien, Here Comes the Navy with Gloria Stewart and Frank McHugh. And an extra community singing ASCAP versus BMI. And at the United Artists, Love and Triple X's for the riotous hit-and-run romance. Excitingly intimate, excruciatingly funny, extra swell. It's Clark Gable and Hedy Lamarr in Comrade X with Felix Bressert and Eve Arden. In its second week from kicks to kisses, it's a riot. With extras, March of Time, Labor and Defense, and Disney, Color Cartoon, and the late news. And at the RKO Palace, Randolph near LaSalle, in its second week, we have a Christopher Morley's daring, intimate, sensational natural history of a woman. Ginger Rogers and RKO Radio's hit Kitty Foyle with Dennis Morgan, James Craig, Eduardo Cianelli, Ernest Cosart. Plus, exciting co-hit, The Saint in Palm Springs with George Sanders and Wendy Berry. And at the McVickers, it's two hits, Tyrone Power and The Mark of Zorro with Linda Darnell and Claudette Colbert, Ray Milland in Arise, My Love with Walter Abel. And at the Garrick, Randolph near Clark Street in its fourth week of Stirring Love and Song, it's Nelson Eddy and Jeanette McDonald, Bittersweet with Ian Hunter and George Sanders. Technicolor, dazzling in its beauty. And at the Roosevelt, in its fourth week of Romantic Wonders, Alexander Korda presents The Thief of Baghdad with Sabu the Elephant Boy, Conrad Veidt, June Dupree, and John Justin, and late Paramount World News. And at the studio, Van Buren Street at Michigan Avenue, suppressed until now, the Chicago premiere of After Mein Kampf with an anonymous cast. At the Apollo, Randolph at Clark Street, rolling up its roars for a third week. It's Jack Benny and Fred Allen in Love Thy Neighbor, Paramount's fun feature with Mary Martin and Rochester. And an extra, Crime Does Not Pay, thriller, Popeye cartoon, and late world news. And at the LaSalle, Madison at Clark Street, Rochelle Hudson, Bruce Cabot, Girls Under 21, Pier 13, Lloyd Nolan, Lynn Berry. And at the Clark, it's Gary Cooper and Paulette Goddard in Northwest Mounted Police, and Dick Powell and Ellen Drew in Christmas in July. At the Monroe, it's Deanna Durbin in Spring Parade with Robert Cummings and Misha Auer, and Bobby Jordan in Pride of the Bowery. And at the Woods, Randolph at Dearborn Streets, a screwball slap happy laugh show with Joey Brown in Beware of Spooks, and Betty Grable, Bob Hope in Give Me a Sailor, plus Laurel and Hardy in County Hospital, and Three Stooges Riot, Three Sappy People. Boy, that is a great show right there. And at the Telenews, the Newsreel Theater stayed at Randolph. The most interesting show in Chicago, 1 hour program of news and shorts. And at the World Playhouse, 410 South Michigan Avenue, third and last week, Romance of a Love Song, it's Schubert's Serenade. Here, Rosamunde Ballet, Moment Musical Serenade. Charming film, the most pleasing Schubert that I have seen. That is from our movie critic, May Tenay. And that is movies playing in the downtown Chicago loop. Okay, now we have an extra. I am going to read an advice column here. Okay, let's see. Let me start this here. I love a married man who tells me that after his children are married and settled in their own homes, he will get a divorce and marry me. I am widowed and have 2 children under 10. I want a home more than anything else, and while I have a fairly good job, I still find existence without a man dull and dreary. You see, my husband died several years ago. It was after his death I picked up with the married man who, in some ways, is good to me, but he is selfish and so jealous of me he can't see at times. Another thing, he drinks and gets nasty, but when he is sober, he is one of the nicest men I know. He has taken a couple of good years out of my life already, and my mother and friends think I'd be much happier did I have a single man in view instead of this married one. I'd be grateful of your advice. Signed, Unhappy. If it is a home you want until you have a better prospect for making it come true in the completed sense of the word, why don't you proceed to make one for the youngsters? Thousands of women are doing just that, and it's more selfless, a more selfless occupation, therefore promising of more happiness. Your own picture of the married man makes him a poor candidate for partnership in your home. Selfish, jealous, a drinker, and nasty with it. Visualize that in the domestic scene and visualize the poor wretch of a woman his wife must be with him out philandering with you, spending money on you that's rightly her due, and using the children's marriages as an alibi for a divorce date which will wager never arrives. Here's a second self help article I thought would be interesting to read. The radio, like the automobile, is universal. We must accept it, but at the same time, we must face the fact that both inventions, where children are concerned, while they offer many advantages, also present problems that are not easily solved. Certainly, the radio plus children, for any at all thoughtful parent, make a hard nut to crack. Having accepted the inevitableness of radio, the next thing to decide is what to do about it, and in deciding what to do about it, the question of responsibility at once enters in. Who is responsible for your child spending too much time at the radio? Who is responsible for which programs your children hear? And who is responsible for their listening to unsuitable programs or those which leave an aftermath of nervous tension, extreme excitability, and bad dreams? Why two persons, or rather factors, are responsible, you and the broadcasting companies. You must take the responsibility of exercising responsible judgment and control over your children's radio entertainment as you do over other aspects of their life in regard to time spent and programs heard. And the broadcasting companies, if they want a children's audience, should solicit that audience by presenting programs prepared or consciously with good taste and a skilled knowledge of children. It is for them a very real and ethical responsibility. Meeting it well should be a good business. I kind of thought that was interesting because some of those arguments are still made today in regards to television. So I just thought I would share that with you. And I also shared the other letter to the advice column because, well, that falls under the category of the more things change, the more they stay the same, I suppose, because that is one of those same problems that is still out there today. So I just thought I would close with those two things. That is news as read from the Chicago Tribune. Henry Chop reporting. Have an awesome day, and God bless.